Hey, this is David from OT Focus, and today I'm going to talk to you about the difference between PT and OT. And this is the question I get everyone asks this all the time working at the hospital, and everyone just asks me this all the time in general. It's like the most asked question if you're an occupational therapist. So what is the difference? So someone told me once that PTs teach people how to walk and OTs teach people how to dance. And that's probably the easiest way to explain it, because physical therapists are all about biomechanical, right? So it's like strength, it's range of motion, it's about, can the patient walk? Is the patient able to stand? Are they able to get out of bed on their own? They just focus on those biomechanical components, where occupational therapists are going to be focusing on those aspects, but in a more holistic way. So can the patient get out of bed? That's important, but it's like more important is, can the patient do something functional? So can the patient get out of bed and walk to the toilet? Can the patient get out of bed and put their socks on or their shoes on? Can the patient get dressed on their own? Can they do those activities that they have to be able to do to survive? Those could be your basic activities, like can they feed themselves? Can they cook for themselves? Can they clean their house? And then you have like these higher level activities. Can they do activities that are meaningful to them, like driving to the grocery store? Can they do their hobbies? Can they continue to play tennis and golf and do the activities that they love? That's what occupational therapy is. Are their needs being fulfilled socially? Or are their needs being fulfilled environmentally? Are they able to physically get in their house? Can they physically get in their car to be able to do the activities that they need to do, like going to the doctor or getting their groceries, and so on and so forth. So that's the main difference. OT is more functional based, and it's more holistic, and it focuses on the client first rather than the patient's diagnosis. Now, why is occupational therapy more important than physical therapy? And I think this is the question that no one ever asks. And I think this is what kind of drives me crazy about the medical world, is that in the medical world, we're so focused on the diagnosis and we're not focused on the patient. And occupational therapy in its true form is all about putting the patient first and focusing on the patient's needs and their goals and their wants and their desires, so you have better outcomes. And if we focus on this aspect of the person's life, we have way better outcomes. The patient becomes so much more motivated, and that's why I think OT is so much more important than physical therapy, because we're focusing on what's meaningful and important to the patient. Because if you get a patient, if you try to convince them to become more independent and like, let's work on getting you from point A to point B. Let's get you walking. But if the patient doesn't want to or has no desire and they're in a lot of pain, and it's like, I don't want to do all this. I'm in so much pain. This is just torture to me. Why would I do this? But occupational therapy is like, well, what are your goals? And what do you want to do in life, and where do you want to be in a year from now? And once we start understanding the patient and their needs and their wants, they can internalize it and become more motivated. I had a patient that's told me once, I want to go to my granddaughter's graduation before I die. And I was like, well, what do you have to be able to do to get there? She was like, well, I probably have to be able to get in a wheelchair. And I was like, right, so let's work on getting out of bed and getting into a wheelchair. Let's practice transferring into a wheelchair. And then after we do that, we're going to have to practice transferring into a car. And you're also going to have to be able to get dressed on your own. So let's focus on those basic steps first, and then we can get to that goal of attending your granddaughter's graduation. So that's what OT is. It's focusing on those important, meaningful aspects of people's life through meaningful activities. Now, another reason why I think occupational therapy is more important than physical therapy, and the best way to say this is to ask this question. So I've always wanted to just be in front of a lot of doctors and say, what can a physical therapist do that an occupational therapist can't do? And a lot of times you'll hear these questions, well, a physical therapist focuses on walking and steps, and that's so important for the patient to be able to discharge because they have to be able to walk a certain amount of steps to be able to be safe to go home. And I'm like, yeah, that's important, but like you're missing the point. Like, is the patient able to get out of bed? Are they able to get dressed? Those are the things that they do on a daily routine. Is the patient able to get on and off a toilet? Because most patients end up, like a lot of patients end up in the hospital falling off their toilet or passing out on their toilet. You have to focus on people's daily activities to be able to assess if they're safe to go home. And physical therapy is important, and it's important to be able to get out of bed and walk and increase your strength and endurance. But OT does that. They pretty much do everything that physical therapy does. We typically don't count steps, but we can. And we typically, in the hospital setting, we don't do stairs, but we can because it's functional. Almost everything that a PT does, an OT does as well, but we make it functional and meaningful to the patient. So that's why I think OT is so much more important, and why I think OTs should try to reclaim their profession. Because I feel like if you look at PT and OT in the medical community, PT is always up here and OT is always down here. And it's always been like that because people don't know what OTs do, and they don't realize the potential of OT. And so I think it's really important that OTs start to reclaim their profession and start doing more physical therapy activities to show that we do the same things. For example, there's outpatient physical therapists who work with that do like athletic training. Now, OTs really should be in the field of athletic training more than PTs because that's a meaningful, purposeful activity. It's such a OT job. It's not even really a PT job. Like, yeah, it's important to learn the biomechanics if you're a baseball player to like throw a baseball, but throwing a baseball is like an occupation-based activity. That's what occupational therapy is, and yet there are no occupational therapists that I know of that are doing athletic training. If you go to an outpatient setting, you're typically seeing a lot of physical therapists working on patients with problems with their legs or knees or hips or lower body injuries, or they may have a stroke or something like that, and they're always focusing on the lower bodies. OTs should be working on lower extremity injuries as well. Like, I don't understand why there's not more OTs working in these jobs that physical therapists are doing. And people won't even hire OTs to work in these fields because that's like a physical therapy job. It doesn't make any sense to me in any way at all. But if people would see that OT is actually so much more in every way, because we focus on the holistic activity. Like, people might say, like, well, what is an OT going to do for a patient with a knee injury or a hip replacement? And it's like, well, we have to make sure that they can get dressed. And say they're in an outpatient setting, what do? Well, the patient got dressed on their way to the outpatient clinic, so OT is no longer needed. Well, that's not true, because the patient still has to do activities like walking to the grocery store, and they may have like hobbies that they want to start doing again, like golfing or tennis or some other activity, and they might be impaired because of their injury. So occupational therapists can actually find activities that the patient can do that's meaningful to them in this setting, and actually go out with the patient and practice these activities so they can begin to do them again. You might say, like, oh no, physical therapists are the experts at shoulder injuries. Well, no. Have you ever seen a hand therapist? Most hand therapists are OTs, and most hand therapists don't just work on the hand. They work on the hand, the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder, and they're like the experts in the field. So, like, there's not a PT that knows more about the shoulder than an OT. OTs can do just as much, and in fact, they can do a lot more because they can make the rehab process more meaningful for the patient. So OT can just be like so important for these patients that are going through the rehab process and want to continue to do their like daily activities, and also activities that are meaningful to them. And that's why like OTs are just so needed in this field that's being overpowered by PT. I think I just kind of ranted for a long time about why I think OT is more important than PT, and it's just because like that's my personal belief, and take it as it is. I hope you like this video, and please subscribe, like, and share it with your friends, because people need to know about the truth of OT. And I feel like nobody knows what OT does, but we really do everything that PT does, but we do it in a more meaningful way. And that's the best answer I can give you. If you want to read the whole post on my rant on OT, why OT is more important than PT, check out the link in the description below, and comment below if you have any thoughts of your own, or if you are totally against everything I just said. I want to hear your thoughts on it. And thanks for watching.